Welcome to Memorial Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. I'm joined, as always, by a distinguished panel this week. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, Reverend Jason Crosby, Center College, Reverend David Harkleroad, South Point Church, New Albany, and Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. Welcome, panel. Our first topic: in the wake of two mass shootings in Louisville within a week, Kentucky gubernatorial candidates are talking about gun laws and what changes they would propose. In the week following the mass shooting that killed 5 people at Old National Bank, Louisville suffered 7 more shootings and 5 more deaths, including two dead in Chickasaw Park. So turning to our panelists, there are many conversations in play. Do you expect this to be a major topic in this race? And what do you hope to see in the long run?
Sadly, I think it's going to be a major topic in Jefferson County and Fayette County. In the rest of the Commonwealth, sadly, I don't think it's on the radar. But something has to be done about the availability of assault weapons. That's where we have to start. There is no reason to use an assault weapon other than to kill a human being. And so this is where we have to start. And hopefully we will, and hopefully good will prevail. I'm going to say it, good, because I think the availability and use of assault weapons in our society is a great evil.
I think it'll be a major issue as well, not just here, but I think for the coming elections during 2024. Seems like someone said recently, I think there's a truth to it, that abortion will be the issue for the Democrats, Second Amendment will be the issue for the Republicans in regards to supporting whatever. And neither one of them, some of us think neither one of them are pro-life, but okay, well, look, that's another issue. Stan, I would follow up on you. I think it is an issue. I have a couple comments to make, so I'll keep my mouth shut. But I think I own weapons. I own long barrels, short barrels, in between barrels. Do a lot of hunting. See the deer head behind me and all this good stuff. I think most of the gun owners in this country are law-abiding. They are responsible individuals. And I would use the word who was the doctor who gave the report after the shooting at the bank. I use his term. He said, I think the nation is becoming exhausted with all the shootings, mass shootings of guns and whatever. And that can lead to major reactions that we see in certain states, whatever, on both sides, to left, right, however you want to say it. I would look at it this way. I think the exhaustion, I'm getting exhausted, and I'm getting all kinds of emotions of being a gun owner about what these individuals are doing out there, doing the evil and I agree with you, it is evil. But there are issues, Stan. I think you mentioned assault weapons and stuff. I would challenge anyone to define that. Even the government can't define it. That's why, if you remember, under the Obama administration, they had a ban on assault weapons. It fell through the cracks because no one could agree upon a definition. Why do people have firearms? Why do people have automobiles? Why do people have paintings? Why do people have shoes? The issue, for my mind, and I'll throw it out again real quickly, it's a constitutional issue. I am not opposed. In fact, I would hope and pray that the Second Amendment, by the way, means change, so it can be changed, would be put forth by a vote in this country again. And let's see if we can do some changing. It's a wholly different issue, a whole different world than the revolutionary times. Yes, I understand that. But I think that we need to not react. We need to be constructive in our procedure. And what I'm hearing, some of the candidates, all this good stuff, John, that you put out to us, it seems like they're just drawing lines and saying this line and I will never cross it. So, I mean, that's my input to begin with.
Well, I feel very similar to that. I'm disappointed with our politicians, just in general. They are drawing those party lines. And, on one side, you have people saying it's all gun control. That's all they want to talk about. On the other side, all they want to talk about is mental health. And this solution is going to be complex. The problem's complex. The solution is going to have to be complex, but nobody wants to deal with it. And, I was scrolling the news today, and what did I see? More shootings, bombings. Nobody, sadly but truly, I skim right past them. If they're not in my neighborhood, okay, I see it every day. It does have to change. And I think here on the moral side, so we can say, yes, there's going to need to be legislation. There's going to need to be intentionality with mental health. But, you know, as a minister, as a Christian, I have real issue that nobody's willing to address this as a spiritual problem. We have a moral insanity running rampant in our culture. And it is because we're walking away from the Judeo-Christian ethic. And the further we get from it, the more clear this is becoming. And I think we have to have some honest conversations that don't just revolve around politics or mental health, but also spiritual health. We are dealing with a deep spiritual problem. Stan, you talked about good and evil. They exist. And we're not teaching our young people that. We're not dealing with that in our culture, and it's creating a massive problem.
David, I'd agree with you that we are dealing with a spiritual crisis. The issue where I would disagree is where I would deviate is that there are countries all around the world, some of which are historically Judeo-Christian, those in Europe, for instance. Others are not historically Judeo-Christian, and they are not having this issue. It is a spiritual crisis, but it appears to me, and there is sociological data to back it up, that part of the problem exacerbating the crisis with guns we're facing in the country is directly tied to the brand of religion that is being perpetrated and put forth into common dialogue in the United States that is unique to the United States, given the accessibility to guns. We have churches for whom protecting the Second Amendment and the right to a gun is more sacred, apparently, than protecting the lives of children. And that's a theology that's being articulated. So yes, we are dealing with a spiritual crisis. But what is distinct for the United States relative to other countries is the access to guns. And if you look around at other countries and you compare where we are relative to other countries that historically are Judeo-Christian or not, no one else is dealing with this. So what is the common denominator that separates us and makes us unique from other countries that are not dealing with these problems, some of which are Judeo-Christian in heritage, some of which are not? It is the access to guns. In terms of how do you define an assault weapon, Tony, it can be nebulous. I agree. An AR-15 is an assault weapon. And when we have a situation here in our community where on April the 4th, someone can walk into a store here in town, is obviously in the midst of some sort of mental, emotional health crisis, and then less than a week later, perpetrate the tragedy that happened here in town. The AR-15s were used. It was used in Nashville. It was used here. If you go back and look at the list of mass shootings that have taken place over the course of this year, you'll find that that particular weapon, while the definition can be more broad, has been used in most of those instances. And then, John, the last thing I'll say to your initial question, how will this play in Kentucky? I'm afraid it's going to play out the same way it's played out in Tennessee, where on the heels of the shooting at Covenant Presbyterian School, the legislature dismissed members that may have not been acting in accordance with proper decorum, but they were roundly dismissed. That's where the energy, time, and effort went. Just this week, Tennessee passed legislation that made guns even more accessible in the wake of that mass shooting. It'll be a political football, but given the complexion of the political constitution, the makeup of those in Frankfurt at the moment, I don't see anything changing, and it's heartbreaking. I can say that the events of last Monday hit very close to my home, as it did for many Louisvillians. But not only what happened at the corner of Preston and Main Street, not only did that hit very close to home for me, so did another shooting that took place that morning at 8th and Chestnut, involving a student at JCTC. And now that's just the reality that we're living with here in Louisville. Data showed that in the United States, more than half the population has in some way been directly affected by gun violence. And I can say that I am a part of that majority, unfortunately, at this point. And the weariness runs deep. It runs so deep. And the yearning for change is there, I think, among the majority of our population, and the inability of our elected leaders to do anything about it, and the complicity of religious leaders in supporting a lack of change is absolutely heartbreaking.
Jason,
I can agree with. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to jump in briefly and say I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, Jason. I would agree with a lot of it. I would nuance some of it maybe differently, but I really don't disagree. I want to jump back just really briefly to the spiritual point. While there are European nations that we're not seeing this, other nations with Judeo-Christian heritage, I remember not long ago, I think it was London, there was a knife attack on a bridge. So yes, the gun issue is unique to our country. It's kind of baked into our heritage. And I'm open to some gun reform. You know, I talked about that last week. But I will say, I still think at the heart of it, there's a heart problem. You know, the first murder happens immediately in Genesis, one brother killing another, and there were no guns present. We have a heart issue, I think, that is not being addressed in our country. So yes, there's gonna have to be legislation. There's gonna have to be medical care and intervention. I'm not trying to make this a single issue, but I think that our country needs to wake up to some of the spiritual problem. And I agree with you. There's churches that need to start caring about life above rights in certain ways.
I would agree with both what you said. And again, Jason, we can debate on AR-15s and all that good stuff, but like you were saying, knives and buses and other things are used for killing as well. Hatchet recently. But still, I agree. There are more guns that need to be, I think personally. But the issue, Jason, the difference between here and those other countries, Judeo-Christian or not, is the Constitution. That's why I keep saying I don't think we're going to ever resolve the issue until that amendment is amended. Okay, and I'm the first one to say let's do it. And it for some reason I cannot understand why either side does not raise that issue. What would we do if they put it on the ballot and the vast majority of the Americans would say we want to keep it the way it is? There's a flip side to the liberties we have, and part of that is responsibility. I think we got the liberties down okay, but responsibilities still, not on just issue of gun ownership, but a lot of other liberties we have, we don't take responsibility for them at all. It was just, I saw in an article just recently, patriotism, less than 23% supposedly of youth who are under the age of 35 see patriotism as even something that they would give their life for, something that they would say as a priority in this lifetime. And to me, being an old guy that I am, I would say that's a major issue. So I would agree, yes, but it's going to be a long, hard road down there until our legal representatives, as you say, I agree, do something in order to bring it to the fore and say, let's let the American people have their say. I think we're going to just go round and around, and both sides, left, right, in between, however you're going to say it, are going to just throw these little sound bites at each other and just get each other ticked off beyond belief until someone will do something with these crazy things. So,
the most misquoted words in the entire Torah are words from the Ten Commandments. And the words that are misquoted are, there is no commandment at all in the original Hebrew that says, thou shalt not kill. It's simply not there. What it does say is, do not commit murder. That's the commandment. And we have to realize that these acts of murder in our world have to cease. And David, what you're saying it makes sense with the spirituality. And to me, the spirituality comes down to yet another quote: love your neighbor as yourself. Nothing more, nothing less. If we truly loved our neighbor as ourselves, then we wouldn't, when the doorbell rings, we wouldn't be put in a situation to open the door and kill someone. That's not what a neighbor does to another neighbor. If we love our neighbor as ourselves, one wouldn't go to a public park and start indiscriminately shooting at people. That's not neighborly. And that we have, maybe I'm being too simplistic, I don't know. But perhaps if we would begin to go back to those basics. And neighbors don't have a real need for AR-15s.
And David, to come back full circle, one reason I appreciate this forum, and one reason I think this is a unique contribution to media, not just in Louisville, but across the nation and beyond, is you don't find too many contexts whereby people from a moral or spiritual point of view can have an actual exchange. And I think we're all agreeing with your sentiment regarding the spiritual aspect and component to this situation. But for me, especially on this issue, especially given the fact that at this point, this is defining a generation. My children, 9 and 12 years old, growing up in this context, working on a college campus with 20-something-year-olds, this is defining their entire formative years. And it's absolutely mind-boggling to me that at this juncture, given the fact that there are legislative tools we can use to address what is a spiritual crisis, that we're failing to do so. Tony, one thing I will say about the limits that can be put on the Second Amendment. I mean, just this week, the settlement was reached between Fox News and Dominion. If freedom of speech could be exercised without any boundaries put in place by either statutes or by stare decisis, by jurisprudence, then anyone could say anything without any detriment or concern at any time. But because defamation, slander, libel do put some limits on what news media might be able to say or others might be able to say, if it's a falsehood, your freedom is limited. That's just one recent example. Well, the same can be said for the Second Amendment. Short of a constitutional referendum, a national constitutional referendum, there are steps that our city can take, if granted the authority by Frankfurt, certainly that our Commonwealth could take as well, that could lead to action. At the end of the day, I'm not optimistic that's going to happen. So maybe it will take a national referendum, but there are steps that can be taken here and now.
I concur with that, but just remember too, none of the liberties we have are absolute. And so the Second Amendment, that's why I say the word amendment means change. And so we changed the original Constitution, but it's going to take, like you talked to your example about Fox News, it's going to take a law court, in a sense, of judicial process before any of that can take place. And any state, any city can do what they want to do in regards, and I applaud their efforts, I really do. But when it comes down to constitutionality, that's going to be a major hump to get over. So, but anyway, but just remember, I own guns and all that kind of stuff, and I've hunted and whatever like that in the military, et cetera. But at the same time, I would, if the government decided constitutionally that the guns had to be turned over, I would be the first one in line to do it. So they're not absolute necessary, but why people want them, why people use them is an individual decision. And we shouldn't be able to judge, should not judge individuals on what they want, what if they can take care of their responsibilities and whatever. But as long as they're responsible, that's the key for me.
All right, panel, we're about 20 minutes on that first topic on moral side of the news. And Tony, a footnote for you, that was Dr. Jason Smith who made those comments about expressing
Jason,
his
right.
weariness. He's the medical director for U of L Health, who
One of my Smith cousins. Okay.
Yeah, that was Dr. Jason Smith. All right, second topic on moral side of the news, and we'll turn to Rabbi Stan Miles. This past week included Holocaust Remembrance Day events across the globe. And Stan, how can we best remember and honor the 6 million Jews and the millions of others that Nazis murdered?
I want you to travel with me to the morning of Holocaust Remembrance Day, in Hebrew, Yom HaShoah, Day of the Holocaust, in Israel. In the morning of this day, I believe it's at 11 a.m., sirens go off all over the land of Israel. And no matter what you're doing, where you're doing, there is a moment of stopping and a moment of silent remembrance. And that includes every car on every highway and road in the land of Israel. Remembering. It's almost like a cliche, but we're discovering to our shock and grief that even if we do remember, the feelings that caused the Holocaust to come to pass are still very alive in the world today. I want to just toss some figures to you. On September 1st, 1939, the day World War II began, the world Jewish population was approximately 18 million. By May of 1945, when the war ended against Nazi Germany in Europe, the world Jewish population was approximately 12 million. 1 out of every 3 Jews alive that September morning in 1939 had been murdered by May of 1945. And that includes 1.5 million children under the age of 13. Today, the world Jewish population is approximately 15 million. But there was once an experiment asking a computer system, what would the world Jewish population have been had the Holocaust not happened? And the answer was, on January 1st, 2000, there would be over 40 million Jews in the world. So it's a time to remember, and it's also in our part of the world, a time to thank some people who deserve our thanks. And that's on behalf of the Jewish community. And that's a group of 8th grade students who year after year after year went with their teacher, Fred Whitaker, from St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Elementary School to Frankfort, Kentucky, to lobby our legislature for Holocaust education in Kentucky. We can't thank them enough because they get it. And with children, with people like that, I see hope in the world.
Well said, well put. Thank you, Stan, for sharing that today. Panel, we've got about 3.5 minutes left, so let's just touch on this last topic. Social media, again, is in the headlines. Prompted by a social media post, teenagers flooded downtown Chicago Saturday night. Police were outnumbered, and in the end, 2 people were shot, 15 arrested, and widespread property damage. Meantime, Montana says enough is enough, and the first U.S. state passed legislation banning TikTok on all personal devices. The bill sent to the governor would prohibit TikTok from operating within state lines and bar the app stores from offering TikTok downloads. Perceived security concerns, as you know, have some federal lawmakers calling for a national ban of TikTok. So, panel, a little bit of time left, about 3 minutes. How do you weigh in on TikTok, social media, gathering of teens, et cetera?
I'll jump in just really quickly because I think this ties to our gun issue in one sense. There is a difficult tension between security and liberty. We saw this in our airports after 9/11. We want freedoms, we want liberties, but it takes a lot to have those. And none of us wants to live in North Korea. You know, there's part of me that's finds it a little bit fearful, the idea of the government regulating, telling us, you know, what forms of communication we can have, we can't have. Again, granted, Jason, there's limitations on freedom of speech, but you know, when the government says, well, you can't have these weapons and you can't use these platforms to communicate, that can be scary. And yet we see it being used, both cases, guns and social media, being used in a damaging, dangerous way. So these are difficult issues.
Comment would be the genie's out of the bottle. And, you know, according to Thomas Aquinas, you can't have a law unless it's a reasonable law, you know, sponsored by competent authority for the common good. I don't see how they're going to basically impact whatever state. It's out there, and you can try to do, but how in the world can you stop this type of engine, if you would, of information? So I'll leave it that way.
Yeah, Tony, I think one thing that's distinct about this particular issue, I think David's right about there similar tensions that we're dealing with. But unlike the gun issue, the way that social media works and technology works in general, it does not respect national boundaries. And so any attempts by any individual state to limit that, even though there are some concerns, understandably, about the ways in which that platform, TikTok, can be used, those attempts are not going to go too far because of the ubiquitous nature in which tech, in particular, pays no attention to the lines drawn on a map.
All right.
When artificial intelligence takes over, we won't have this issue. So.
Well, that topic will be on another episode of Moral Side of the News. Thank you for this episode to Stan Miles, Jason Crosby, David Harkleroad, and Tony Smith. We'll have an all-new conversation next week. Thanks for joining us, and join us again next week for Moral Side of the News. Thank you, panel. The 70th annual WHAS Crusade for Children is just a few months away, and there's something new and special. For just $70, make a contribution, and you get a raffle ticket to a kitchen full of GE appliances, microwave, refrigerator, stove, and dishwasher. Second place, a washer dryer. Third place, an ice maker. $70 per ticket. Only 1,000 tickets will be sold. Find out more at WHAScrusade.org. That's WHAScrusade.org. And join us again next week with an all-new conversation here on Moral Side of the News.